to MMG. So, I took a little bit of a break. I was out of town. This is not financial advice. Consult your financial advisor before doing anything. This is more of an educational channel. I could be completely wrong. This is just me ranting, giving you guys my opinions and thoughts on economics, finance, and the markets. So, today was a big day because Trump finally said something during one of his speeches. He was at the Economic Club of New York, where all the big, fancy schmancy Ivy League economists are, and he gave a speech about the economy. And the markets were definitely watching. It was kind of like an FOMC, except it's the president. And I'm going to go over what Trump said, then I'm going to do some TA. Overall, what he said was it was very bullish for metals. And the dollar is taking a hit, and the market's hitting all-time highs. All three markets, except the Russell 2000, which in my opinion is the most important because of the domestic, smaller size companies. Volatility, the VIX is at all-time lows. Gold and silver was definitely smashed in the past 2 days, right? We all saw that. Listen, it was a little bit of both, I think. The market just selling metals because they don't believe in this rally. And then, of course, it's getting smashed because those huge drops in very short spans of time, which no one does that if they want to maximize their profits. They don't just hit the sell everything button like billions and tens of billions, right? You only do that if you want to push the price down for two reasons. The first reason is banks, maybe governments, they want to keep metals down before the next leg up because they know they're going to come out and give speeches talking about negative interest rates, or maybe some whales or the same entities want to buy up metals cheaper, so they push the price down. So let's just get into the Trump speech here. Listen, I know some of you get triggered because it doesn't matter what political spectrum you're on. He's an alpha and he's funny. That's all. That's like, you can listen to someone like that. And he's, does he bend the truth? Does he exaggerate things? Absolutely, he has to. He can't come out and just say the absolute truths because that would affect the economy and the market very negatively. But, after listening to his speech, he definitely has a plan because he definitely knows what's going on. Because he says a lot of the things that I say. And let's just hop into this, and then I'm gonna stop it every few seconds so I don't get hit with a flag or whatever from the tube, and then I'm gonna give you guys my thoughts and opinions. I can't just let it play. You have to understand that.
And at that time, America was stuck in a failed recovery and saddled with a bleak economic future, and it was bleak. Under the last administration, nearly 200,000 manufacturing jobs had been lost. Almost 5 million more Americans had left the labor force, and jobs were not exactly what you would call plentiful. And 10 million people had been added.
Okay, true, right? And during his campaign, he campaigned on the fact that the numbers were skewed, and he literally said over 20% to 25% of the working age population is unemployed. Or some of them are probably working under the table. But that's true.
Added to the food stamp rolls. In 2016, the Department of Labor predicted that Americans would continue dropping out of the workforce in record numbers. They predicted and projected a decade of sluggish growth, and they expected unemployment over 5%, and really 6, 7, and even in some cases 8% for years to come. The so-called experts said the America had no choice but to accept stagnation, decay, and a shrinking middle class as the new normal. That was said all the time. We have launched an economic boom, the likes of which...
Okay, that was all true. And I remember back during Obama's term, they were saying this is the new normal, this is globalization, blah, 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 which is true. It is globalization. And we're going to get a little more in depth about all this. I just think
8% for years to come. The so-called experts said the America had no choice but to accept stagnation, decay, and a shrinking middle class as the new normal. That was said all the time. We have launched an economic boom, the likes of which we have never seen before. I did this despite a near record number of rate increases and quantitative tightening by the Federal Reserve since I won the election. 8 increases in total, which were, in my opinion, far too fast an increase and far too slow.
All right, is it really 8 increases? That's a lot. Well, there were only 25 basis points, right? 0.25% on the interest rate. So a normal interest rate is really up around 8%. And the first rate hike was at the very last month, December of 2015. And then the market took a dump, I remember, right after that. And then they didn't raise rates for the entirety of 2016. The entirety of 2016. Meanwhile, he was running for election, right? And he won, obviously. But what I'm trying to say is, during the entire term of the last president, interest rates were only being cut. They were kept at 0. And they only raised it once, just 0.25 basis points. That was it, and then they stopped. Janet Yellen stopped, the football head. And that's what Trump's saying. And now he's saying that during his presidency, the stock market's been rallying, and they've been raising rates, like nonstop, which is absolutely true. Now, historically, this is called the business cycle. Every time the Fed tries to normalize the interest rate, what happens? The economy falls into a recession. Why is that? Because they can't normalize the interest rate, because once they do that, they suck money out of the system. Well, one, they choke off the money, the cash flow, the credit going into the system, the liquidity. And the second thing that happens is the debts come due. So you need more money to pay off the existing debt, because all money created is debt, except there's interest on top of it. So then it comes due, and the interest rates on bonds start going up. They start spiking. And then all the chickens come home to roost. All the debt comes due for everyone. And that happens every single time the Fed raises rates. They pop their own bubble. It's that simple. Another thing that happens is cash stops flowing into the markets, because once they cut off the punch bowl, then banks stop lending. Hence the repo madness that's going on. There's no liquidity between the banks, the interbank lending, right? So now, as of late, that's why they've been injecting over $200 billion, which is insane. I'll talk about that in a second. So yeah, and Trump knows that. And that's why he keeps screaming at the Fed, because he knows if they kept raising rates, or if they don't start lowering rates even faster now, he knows the bubble will pop on his watch. And he's afraid of it being politically motivated, which it probably is. And so he's going to blame the Fed, and the Fed is going to blame him. That's literally what it is. During the FOMCs, if you pay attention, they always bring up the fact that trade tensions are slowing the global economy. which the global economy was slowing prior to Trump even getting elected. Either way, it has to be done, because if it's not done, what's going to happen to the United States if there's no manufacturing jobs and there's only a trade deficit? I don't know. It's like people are going to eat each other to survive. So
a decrease. Because remember, we are actively competing with nations who openly cut interest rates, so that now many are actually getting paid when they pay off their loan, known as negative interest. Who ever heard of such a thing? Give me some of that. Give me some of that money. I want some of that money. Our Federal Reserve doesn't let us do it. I don't say, thank you, thank you. The smart people are clapping. Only the smart people are clapping.
all right, so he literally just called for negative interest rates. If that's not bullish for gold and silver and bearish for the dollar, I don't know what the hell is. Like I said in my last video, gold should be at 3,000, silver at 100. And if silver, goes to 100, which is a 5x, and gold goes to 3,000, the mining stocks are going to just, I don't know. There's just thousands of percent gains on like everything. I don't know. But so that's my personal strategy. Will it work? I don't know. I'm not a prophet. Am I confident on it? Yes. Can I be completely wrong? Absolutely. Consult your financial advisor with that ISO'd suit. So what Trump is saying, if the U.S. lowers their interest rates, it's bad for the global economy, which I actually disagree with. Because right now, capital flight is flying into the U.S. markets, right? Although it might somehow work out, because then the U.S. markets become even more attractive for the rest of the world. So capital flight out of the rest of the world, still going into the U.S. stock market. That's why the U.S. stock market just keeps going higher and higher. And where's all that money coming from? Everyone should be already all in if they're all in by now. You know what I'm saying? Like, who's left? U.S. retail investors, like, they're tapped out. They're maxed out on credit cards and everything. They're not buying any more stocks. If anything, the baby boomers are retiring and selling stocks. All right, so that's a whole different video. But it's good for the U.S. because he needs to fix the trade deficit, and he needs a weaker dollar to do that, to be able to compete with the rest of the world. Also, the U.S. debt comes due if the dollar keeps strengthening. Remember the milkshake theory, the milkshake melt-up theory, whatever, where the dollar just keeps strengthening and strengthening and strengthening. If that happens, for the very short term, it's good for the U.S. and the U.S. Retailer, because we're going to get deflation. You could buy everything real cheap. The bad thing is all the debt that's private and public becomes like the interest on it explodes because the value of the dollar goes up. Value of the dollar goes up. The debts owed goes up. The 200 and something trillion in all the liabilities, the corporate debt, all debts just go up. And that blows up the system. So it's like a balancing act. He needs to keep the dollar weaker. He doesn't want it to crash. We don't want hyperinflation, but we can't let it go any higher. And it's insane because the U.S. has to compete on debasing its currency with the rest of the world, but in a way that it doesn't cause a crack-up boom, and all of a sudden people start fearing inflation. And when they do that, that's when you get runaway inflation.
I don't say that's good for the world. I'm not president of the world. I'm president of our country. But we are competing against these other countries nonetheless.
All right, so he's definitely not a globalist, right? All the other politicians, you could argue they sold the U.S. out, right, for foreign interests, and they did. I believe so. And that's why they didn't care about China, all the jobs leaving, all the industrial jobs leaving. And the corporations, right, they don't care as long as they profit. Another reason why the stock market went up so much during Trump's last 3 years is because of his promises he made, and then he actually started fulfilling them, like deregulation and tax cuts for corporations and for private individuals and for small business owners. Um, he does talk about it in a little bit, but what that does is it brings money back into the U.S. and it makes the U.S. companies more competitive, but also these international companies are kind of stuck with the U.S. then because his policies, his foreign policies, this trade war and the tariffs aren't good for the U.S. But in the short term, but in the long term, it's good because it kind of destroys China, and we are engaged in economic warfare because you cannot let China keep gutting the U.S. and destroying its manufacturing base, taking intellectual property, and then suckering in all the U.S. major corps to go to the China, and then obviously, they, who knows what they do? They could bribe him, take over. You guys understand, right?
And the Federal Reserve doesn't let us play at that game. It puts us at a competitive disadvantage to other countries. Yet in the face of this reality, our economic policies have ushered in an unprecedented tide of prosperity, surging all throughout the nation. We're paying interest. By other comparisons, we're paying actually high interest. We should be paying by far the lowest interest, and yet we're doing better than any nation by far on earth. The extraordinary numbers tell the story.
Right. The U.S. is the least dirty shirt in the hamper, or the nicest looking turd in the yard if you have a dog. that's my analogy. And what he's saying is, let's print money, guys, while it's still worth something, because we're still the strongest in the world. So, it's kind of like maybe he planned this out. First, you make the rest of the world weak. Because, the entire world's going in the same direction. Everything's going to go to shit in the end anyways. Just always remember that, guys. It's all going to go to shit in the end anyways. It's just too much debt out there for everyone. But this game of musical chairs before the music stops, Trump has a plan, right? What I'm thinking his plan is to print while you can, take advantage of these low interest rates, whatever, rack up that debt, do whatever you can, and do some infrastructure spending, do more tax cuts, more deregulation, and start bringing back manufacturing, bring incentives for these corporations to come back. By the way, lowering the tax rate, a lot of money came back from shell corps across the seas. That's another reason why the stock market's been hitting all new time highs. All markets, all three all-time highs, spend your money well, in Trump's words. But there is a plan. Like, I can see what they're sort of doing. Now, what's the final plan? I'm not exactly sure. Is he just going to default on everything in the end? Probably. I don't know. It's what I would do. Like, screw it all. Or, maybe we will experiment with a little bit of some runaway hyperinflation. And then eventually, but here's the deal. The U.S. can't go back to a gold standard unless the manufacturing base is rebuilt. Because if you do go to a gold standard or something, even a crypto standard, whatever, some sort of peg, what happens is if you have a negative trade balance, right, the gold or the bitcoins, whatever, will get sucked out of the country because of trade deficits. You understand? A trade deficit means you are spending more money. Basically, you're just importing products and spending more money than you have. And then what happens is your savings gets depleted, which would be whatever they would peg the new dollar to, right? Which would more than likely be gold and silver, because central banks have been buying them since 2008 and at an ever increasing level. Don't believe me? Go watch that last Mike Maloney video.
Back in 2016, before I took office, the Congressional Budget Office projected that fewer than 2 million jobs would be created by this time in 2019. Instead, my administration has created nearly 7 million jobs and going up rapidly. We beat predictions. Thank you.
The problem I have with that is he's using the same metrics as the last administration to count these figures. And he knew when he was running that those numbers were bogus. He literally said it on the campaign trail. But he's using the same numbers, and now they work for him, right? So hypocrisy. Again, guys, I mean, it's a Ponzi scheme, the entire global financial system. So with a con game, you need to keep, what's a con? It's a con, right? So a con game, you need to keep confidence going. Can you blame him? That's what makes me mad about these other people on YouTube. Like, he can't just come out and say what we say, because shit will hit the fan. Like, everyone will, like, who knows what'll happen. So I hate those people who can't understand, who can't put themselves into someone else's shoes.
And manufacturing was supposed to be dead in our country. You would need, according to a past administration representative, at the highest level of that past administration, you would need a magic wand to bring back manufacturing jobs. Well, we brought them back, and we brought them back to over 600,000 manufacturing jobs as of today.
True, but a lot has been lost as well. Manufacturing base is actually really, really weak, especially the last recent economic data. So that's not good. So is he winning the trade war and bringing back manufacturing? Not yet. Not yet. So it's very crucial he wins re-election, because nobody after him is going to fix this. Nobody. Or even has a chance. He has a small chance of fixing this. A very small chance. But he's probably the only one who could pull it off. Anyone who comes after him isn't going to do anything. And it's going to go towards full-blown, probably everything falls apart. So, you like him or hate him, he's the only one who's actually has any chance of saving the country from very bad times. Like, scary stuff.
Most of you aren't very active in the market, but since my election, the S&P 500 is up over 45%, the Dow Jones is up over 50%, and the NASDAQ is up 60%, slightly more.
I like how he always slightly more. That's pretty crazy if you think about it. If you guys want to see, look at this. Let's take a look at the. We'll just look at the S&P. I show you guys this stuff all the time. Oh, we'll look at the S&P and then the NASDAQ. How about that? I mean, this is crazy, guys. In 3 years, since here, right here, see that? This is Trump. It's crazy. Look at this. This is Trump. Let me zoom out. This is 2009, all the way down here. Look at that. That's insane. This is Trump, the circle right up here. Well, let me take away some of this stuff, if you guys can see better. Look at that. It's insane. How much is it up since the bottom of 2009? Where is it? Oh, it's just a ruler. So it is up since 2009. Wow. Around 360%. The S&P 500. Since 2009. When this thing falls, and it might not fall for another year or something. I don't know. With negative interest rates, I don't know how long they could keep it going up. Like I said, guys, Venezuela's stock market went into a hyperbolic melt-up phase because nominally the money was becoming worth nothing, but the shares in currency, in fiat value, kept going up nominally. So that might happen in the U.S. as well. And people are going to think they're getting rich off of paper stocks, but they're really not, because once they sell their stocks, they're not, the fiat's not going to be worth as much. So let's say the stock market goes up another 100%. You had 100 grand, right? Let's say in Apple, and then now you have 200 grand in Apple. At the end, like 3 years from now when you sell it, but the currency lost 75% of its value. So technically you lost money in today's value. Do you understand what I'm saying? But look at this. This is nuts. Let me drag it over. This is starting to go pretty parabolic here. If the S&P 500 goes to 3,500 by the end of like 2020, near the end of 2020, it's a straight shot up, parabolic. And what that means is that's it. Like, it can't keep that momentum. I mean, it's already pretty... Look at the degree and angle it's going up here. So if we get a melt up from here on, like I said, it's going to be short-lived. I'll be surprised if we make it till the end of 2020 before putting in a top. I'm not saying it's going to crash, just saying putting in the top. Everyone thinks like the market's going to crash next week. I hate those people. And they're always shorting. They're probably broke by now. I never say short, by the way. I never say short. I do short going long inverse ETFs. If you're not a professional trader, you don't understand how risky it is to short. Your upside potential shorting is actually very small. I just like shorting maybe a couple companies. All right, let's get back to the video. This is going to be a long one. Damn it.
And if we had a Federal Reserve that worked with us, you could have added another 25% to each one of those numbers. I guarantee you that. That doesn't happen. But
then it would be parabolic.
Not too often. We do make them on occasion. American markets have vastly outpaced the rest of the world. This exceptional growth is boosting 401ks, pensions, and college savings accounts for millions and millions of hardworking families. You hear so much about inequality and all of the differences and all of the problems. The single biggest benefactors of what we've done are middle-class workers and low-income families. It's been amazing, actually. Altogether, we've added nearly...
Oh, hold on. Actually, that gap is... the Fed printing money does destroy the middle class. And the rich get richer because they have all the stocks. The middle class has some stocks. And again, that's why they're going to print and have negative rates. Because if they don't, all them boomers' retirements is going to go poof, gone. And, yeah. And you have to understand how the inequality works. I mean, who gets loans? Only rich get big loans. And the rich know how to use debt to make more money. They also buy equities and assets, right, that produce cash. And they get all the loans, okay? The middle class is tapped out. You know, they've gone bankrupt a few times from last recessions. They don't know how to manage money because they're taught to not know how to manage money in public schools. Uh, they're just lamb. They're sheep to get slaughtered every business cycle, and that's what central planning and central banking does, right? So that's why the rich get richer because all that funny money, Fed money, goes to corporations, corporate buybacks. Why do corporations buy back their stock? Because CEOs only stay at a company for 4 or 5 years, and a lot of their pay comes in stock shares, and then they could sell them and offload them, and then leave the company to the next sucker, right? So let's continue here.
$10 trillion of new value to our economy. That's in a short period of time. Remember, I only use numbers from the time of the election because I can't go to January 20th. It's not fair. We picked up tremendous stock market and economic numbers. They actually went wild the day after I won. I think that should be attributed to us, not attributed to somebody else, because it would have gone in the opposite direction.
Right. If Hillary would have won, it probably would have still gone up, but not as much, or maybe it would have fell. And he's saying that prior to the election it started going up, which is also true. Which was back here, February 2016. Oh, here's November 2016.
It would have gone in the opposite direction had the other result taken place, which fortunately it didn't. Last year, GDP growth matched the fastest rate in more than a decade, and it was the best of the G7 countries by far, by far. Perhaps most importantly, after years of stagnation and decline, American wages, salaries, and incomes are rising very fast. Median household income is now at the highest level in the history of our country.
I don't know about that. In the history, in dollar terms, but the purchasing power, like, just think about it. I mean, back in the 60s, 50s, one man supported like a house of six people, think of the Brady Bunch. One, engineer, one, what was Brady? Wasn't he was an architect, I think. Could support an entire family of six, even have two cars and a nice big house. Not anymore.
The average median income under President Bush rose only $400 over an 8-year period. Under President Obama, it rose $975 over an 8-year period. And under my administration, it rose $5,000 over slightly more than just 2.5 years.
See, those are some 5,000. That's a lot, and I need a fact check on this. I believe the first two numbers he threw out there, and obviously those numbers don't count because that means you lost money because the inflation for even Bush and Obama was running. Think about it. 16 years ago, how strong was the dollar compared to today? If you made... I remember how much stronger the dollar was. A middle class was like someone making over $2,000. Like if you made like $2,500 a month, you were like middle class. You could own a nice home. Although I wouldn't say that because there was definitely price inflation. I mean, home prices were already going through the roof back then. So I can't say that because already in the late 90s and early 2000s, home prices were through the roof, right? But everyone bought homes, ninja loans.
That's a big difference. And if you remember, President Obama was paying 0% interest for a long period of time, while we're paying a much higher rate of interest. But in addition to the $5,000, we have to add $2,200 for the tax cuts, average tax cuts, and $2,000.
All right, let me explain something. I said this earlier during Obama's presidency. I mean, interest rates were near zero the entire time. The entire time. So liquidity was just getting pumped into the stock market, which was also making its way to Main Street loans. That's why today we have these huge tech companies and the FANG index, right? A lot of the money went into there, and the economy maybe expanded a little bit, but because of the low interest rates, and Trump's economy has been, I would say, a little bit stronger than Obama's. A little bit, not much, on Main Street in the real world, but stronger. And he's doing it with interest rates being risen, right, by the Fed. So he made a good point there. And what did he just say?
Interest for a long period of time, while we're paying a much higher rate of interest. But in addition to the $5,000, we have to add $2,200 for the tax cuts, average tax cuts, and $2,000.
All right, most people don't understand that less taxes are being pulled out of your paycheck throughout the year. The money you're going to get back at the end of the year is actually smaller if you make below a certain amount. Forget which tax bracket, but that first one. Most Americans don't pay taxes. They get tax refunds. Those refunds are from the money they made all year, right? Well, with his tax credits and his tax cut, most Americans, they keep more money they make throughout the year, but they'll get a smaller tax refund at the end. But an average American who makes, who are in the lower brackets, they're so dumb. They don't understand that they're keeping more money. It's just that they're not getting a larger refund because their paychecks have gotten a little bit bigger now. And that's why. They probably think their employer gives them more money or something. I don't know. But, in a weird way, it's kind of like when they get their refund, it's like the feds have been saving money for them. The poorer people making less than I believe it's like 38,000 or something like that, or 36. Anyways, yeah, that's what he was talking about.
$1,000 to $3,000 for regulatory and energy cuts. So that would be a total of almost $10,000 versus 400 and versus 975. So that's something. So you have over 8 years, you have 400. Over 8 years, you have $975. Over 2.5 years, we're almost up to 3, but this was done and calculated only as of 2.5, and it's only gone up since then. We're at almost $10,000. So our consumers, because of this, are in the best shape probably in the history of our country, and I think it's going to be very long-lasting.
I disagree, because everyone has so much debt. It's kind of like nobody wants to look at the debt. Nobody on mainstream financial news, nobody talks about it, except a few people on the tube here. And the consumer at some point is going to be tapped out, especially with all the boomers retiring now. They're going to start pulling money out of the markets. They cut back on spending. They have to, right? Because there's no income coming in besides pensions and all the entitlements that are not funded. The money's not there. Where's that going to come from? Well, it's going to come from the Fed. Can't come from taxes because we're already taxed to death. If they raise taxes anymore, especially on the middle class, it's game over. Interesting. The consumer. So it's a consumption-based economy, the U.S. It's not manufacturing-based anymore. That's how the U.S. initially became the strongest economic superpower in the world is its manufacturing base because of the freedoms and the low taxes like 100 years ago, 150, 200 years ago, right? The low taxes, the freedom, and no regulations back then. Kind of sounds like China in the past 10 years, right? All right. So, but now it's a consumption based. Can you, as a corporation or a company, stay profitable or stay in business if your business model is to consume goods and to not make anything? No, right? It's that simple. So, but he has to say that for the markets to keep going higher because, well, if the consumer stops consuming, then companies start laying people off, stop producing, right?
Very, very long lasting. This all
What I'm trying to say is a healthy economy is you're manufacturing at least as much or more than you're consuming. And that's how you build savings. Savings builds capital. Capital builds more businesses and more wealth and assets.
also allows me the latitude and timing to take some of the horrible, incompetent, just terrible trade deals that have been made over the years and make them great. It's like make America great again, make the trade deals great. I don't know if I can use the word again. Make them great, period, because I don't think they were ever any good. Haven't seen it. We were great, and then we weren't so great, but we're great again. And by the way, on jobs, just now, I'm glad this is today, because just now, they just announced we have the highest number of people working in our country, in the history of our country, almost 160 million people. We've never been close to that number.
Okay, percentage wise, all right, obviously, you he's not lying, but in the way that he's delivering what he's saying is it's misdirection, all right? And you have to be careful in this world. Like I people don't lie, let's say, but they don't tell you the truth. Is it lying? No, but it's misdirection, right? Yes, the population of the US has been growing and growing and growing. So there is more people working than ever before. The problem is the quality of the jobs and the percentage of the population working. I've gone over this like a while ago, over a year ago, on these numbers. If you look at U6 employment, they're counting part-time jobs as full-time jobs. There's actually a very large there's a large percentage of the population that's not working who are supposed to be working. They're like at working age, right? But they're not working for many reasons. I don't want to go through it. What I'm trying to say is it was a small number. I don't want to do it in this video. Who actually have full-time jobs. A small percentage of the population. Only 90 million are. Did you just say 160 million are working? Okay, 160 million are working. The population's 320, 330 million at this point. So only half of the population is actually working. Now, that half of the population, that 160 million, how many have real jobs? Full-time jobs. They're not bartender, waitresses. They're not working at gas. Have small part-time jobs. It's a very small amount. It's only like 90 million. So 90 million out of 320 million, let's say, have full-time jobs. That's not even 1/3. All right, to put it into perspective, it's like 26%, something like that.
So we've achieved this stunning turnaround because we've adopted a new economic policy that finally puts America first. As president, I understand and embrace the fact that the world is a...
Just elaborate on what I just said earlier. 27%, something like that, of the population pay taxes. Everyone else, not so much.
place of fierce competition. We're competing against other nations for jobs and industry growth and prosperity. Factories and businesses will always find a home. It's up to us to decide whether that home will be in a foreign country or right here in our country, our beloved USA, and that's where we want them to stay and be and move to.
And honestly, every other president, they never talked about this. That's why it's hard to believe that he's part of the bad guys. Cuz he wouldn't be doing that if he was. I don't know, guys. I mean, of course he has to answer to some of them cuz they control and they're so powerful. But he probably makes deals with them like, let me try to save the US and then I'll let you guys go, or something. Who knows, right? We don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. But he is trying to bring back manufacturing and all that. Will he be successful? I have no idea. I hope so. For the US sake and the world. I mean, you do not want to see the US fall. It's the last place on earth where you have real freedom, or what's left of it, right?
If we want our families and communities to prosper, America must be the best place on earth to work, invest, innovate, build, pursue a career, hone a craft, or start a business. We want companies to move to America, stay in America, and hire American workers. My mission is to put our country on the very best footing to thrive, excel, compete, and to win. For many years, our leaders in Washington did the exact opposite. They imposed the highest corporate tax rates in the developed world, so high that people couldn't even understand what they were doing, and they would leave. Very, very smart executives didn't want to leave, but they would leave, sending our jobs and everything else all aflutter. They waged an unethical regulatory assault on the American people. They tried to shut down American energy, and by the way, they're still trying.
Right. That's why like him or hate him, I mean, if he doesn't win, they're gonna like shut down our energy. All the coal, most energy comes from coal. By the way, all of the renewable energy, where does it come from? Coal. All recycling. By the way, it costs more. I pretty sure it costs more to recycle than the energy you put into recycling wastes more than what you're getting out of the recycling. Same with all the batteries and the new solar panels and the electric, electric vehicles. It's not feasible. If it was, they wouldn't get grants from the taxpayer. The taxpayer wouldn't have to pay automotive companies and all these renewable companies grants because the government gives them free money to build these things, because if they didn't, they wouldn't be able to profitably do it. Do you understand? The windmills, everything. It's all being subsidized. And this, the climate change agenda and all that, besides, probably depopulating the planet, it's also a scam, right? To raise taxes on the public, and you need a boogeyman to do it, right? They always raise the taxes during wars, and then they need a boogeyman. So the new boogeyman is the climate's changing. Of course it's changing, the sun, there's cycles within the universe that probably change it. The poles are changing. The North Pole has moved like a bunch of degrees, and every thousands of years it flips. That could, cause disaster, a great flood, right? So maybe that's doing climate change. But anyways, if you look at pictures, the sea level hasn't risen at all in the past hundreds of years. So I'm done.
You want to see energy shut down? Take a look at what I'm competing against on the other side. I don't think they even believe in energy. So far, I haven't found any form of energy that's acceptable to them. I think they think the factories are just going to work without energy, don't they? They don't have a clue, these people, but I don't want to mention it yet. I want to wait a little bit longer. Let them go a little bit further so they can't take it back. Because as a campaign, I like it. I like it very much.
He's literally saying, let them bury their own grave. Because the more they say, the more the public realizes that they're insane.
Let them keep talking. Every time they talk, I say, boy, this looks like it might be easier than I anticipated. Of economics is the power of incentives. Unlike past leaders, my goal is to ensure that this power works for America's favor and for America's workers and for America's companies. We want the incentives created by our tax, trade, regulatory, and energy policies to be pro-growth, pro-worker, and 100% pro-American, and more is yet to come. If we take back the House in 2020 and retain the Senate and the White House, you will see things that even this room, and you've experienced a lot of great times over the last 2.5 years, but even you will be surprised to see. We have tremendous economic potential.
Right. Will that happen? I don't know. I don't know how far gone the U.S. is. Like, socially and mentally. Because the education system, it's all owned by the left. Everything you see on TV, it's all lefty stuff. I don't know how entrenched that gets. Obviously, he hasn't been doing much to help people who voice their opinion, like I am, on the tube or anywhere else on all the platforms. So I don't know. I don't. Maybe he thinks it all really depends on the economy. If the economy keeps getting better for the next 12 months, he'll probably win. And his competition's not that great. By the way, Bloomberg. All right. Well, he has a chance. The thing is, he's really old. And I don't know. He probably won't run, or he probably lose maybe to Trump because he's so old. I don't know. It's still a wild card. If Hillary comes back, that'd be hilarious. She probably has a better chance than all of them. I don't know. No, probably not. I mean, everyone knows. That's probably why he won. Warren, there's no way the financial markets could let her happen. Unless she's just lying about everything and just going all the way to the most extremes to the left, and then won't actually do all those things, but probably will. Seems pretty off a rocker. They don't understand economics, or they're really out to destroy the country at this point. You can't be anywhere in between. There's no way you could believe that stuff. All right. I digress.
We have tremendous potential. We have tremendous economic potential. At the heart of our economic revival is the biggest tax cut and reforms in American history. We provided massive relief for working families, saving $2,000 a year for a typical family of four. To bring jobs back, we lowered our business tax rate from the highest tax rate in the developed world down to a very competitive number, not quite the lowest, but getting close. And we may even be able to get there one day, in the not too distant future. And by the way, we're taking in more tax revenue with these greatly reduced rates, 21%, and it was 39, but when you added everything else, it was well into the 40s. And you couldn't bring your money back because that was prohibitive, both ministerially and from an economic standpoint, the rate was so high. But we brought it down to a level that we're very proud of, and we think we can bring it down still more, and yet we have more tax revenues coming in to our Treasury than we've ever had before. That tells you something right there. Since then, nearly $1 trillion have returned to our shores where that money belongs. Couldn't get it back. No matter what you did, you couldn't do it. We believe in no American left behind, and we understand the enormous power of investment, capital, and opportunity to revitalize communities and bring hope.
Let's fast forward here.
I'll say this, because they know that I'm very tentative on the WTO. We're winning cases for the first time. We just won a 7.5.
All right, he's talking about World Trade Organization, which is like the global, elite. So he had to go head to head with China, and he's going to go head to head with Europe as well, because they are all taking advantage of the U.S. Do tariffs work? That as the libertarians, the tariffs do end up taxing your own public, but if the tariffs do more damage to the other economies and all their capital flies into your markets, into your bonds, then the tariffs worked, just not how they expect them to work in the economic books, right? In a way, it's a very clever game. And I think that's what's happening here.
$1 billion case. We never won cases. They'd rule against us because they said, hey, don't worry about the United States. They're the stupid people. Don't worry, rule against them. Keep rule. We had case after case. Now we're winning cases because they really think that I'll do something very powerful, which we have the right to do. And they're right when they think that way. And we're winning a lot of cases at the WTO level we never even would have thought of winning.
So what he meant by that was he'll do something powerful, meaning probably full-blown war or something. I forgot my...
America is now the #1 producer of oil and natural gas on the entire planet Earth.
So what I was trying to say is, I've been saying for weeks now, there will not be a trade deal, and there shouldn't be. And that's probably what's going to happen. They just keep talking about it in the news, like nonstop. It's a waste of time. It's just a way to kind of manipulate the motions of the market. I don't know. To get the algos to buy. I don't know. But there's probably not going to be a trade deal. If there is, it's going to be really heavily weighted towards the U.S. or very fair to the U.S. And that's a sign of weakness to the Chinese, and they're not going to do that because they have different plans, and that's global domination, right? So there's not going to be a trade deal, and I'm right. And he just said that U.S. is the biggest exporter of, well, not the biggest. We are now net exporters of energy, and we've never been exporters of energy, which is also, a lot of people don't talk about that, but that's another reason why probably oil prices and everything's been low for so long. And it's sort of stimulus to the economy. I mean, cheap gas at the pumps, that keeps everyone shopping and going places and traveling, right? When cost of energy goes up, you stay home and you don't do much. And yeah.
Net energy imports. Net energy imports, this is so great, set a historic low. It's a 58-year low, but that's only because they only go back 58 years, meaning I assume if it's low now, it's lower than it used to be, unless something happened that's very strange back then. But it's at a historic low. We are now a net exporter of natural gas, and we recently became a net exporter of crude oil and petroleum products for the first time in our country's history. It's a big thing. Those who want access must play by the rules, and they have to respect our game and our laws, and they have to treat our workers and businesses fairly, not the way they've been treating them over the last 25 years. America will not be taken advantage of anymore. Many countries charge us extraordinarily high tariffs or create impossible trade barriers. Impossible. And I'll be honest, European Union, very, very difficult. The barriers they have up are terrible, terrible. In many ways, worse than China. We're working on legislation known as the United States Reciprocal Trade Act, meaning quite simply, what's good for them is good for us. They want to charge us, we charge them. It's a very simple thing, even people that aren't well versed in what we all do, because it's very unfair the way we're treated by certain countries. There are certain countries that the average tariff is over 100%, and we charge them nothing. And then they call it fair trade. That's not fair trade. That's stupid trade.
Right, he's all about fixing the trade deficit. He's going to talk about Mexico as well.
Of course, this will be subject to regaining the House to be able to do these things. Nowhere has the change in U.S. strategy been more vital or dramatic than in our dealings with respect to China.
China.
Before my election, Washington politicians stood by and did nothing while China ransacked our companies, stole our intellectual property, subsidized their industries at the expense of ours, and dumped their products in a deliberate strategy to close American factories all across our land. For many years, America...
That's wage gouging. That's what monopolies do. They drop their prices as low as humanly possible. And it hurts the company for a short period of time, but it's worth it because you'll put your competitors out of business. That's how monopolies are formed. And also then there's monopoly cartels, right? Which is OPEC,
Leaders have just sat back. Maybe they didn't understand what was going on. It's impossible to believe that. But they just let it happen. And it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And now we've changed it. It's changed a lot. I'm sure you haven't noticed, but it's changed a lot. In particular, since China's entrance into the World Trade Organization in 2001. No one has manipulated numbers better or taken advantage of the United States more. And I won't use this word cheated. I will not say the word cheated, but nobody's cheated better than China, but I will not say that. Yes, he was not as imposing a figure as Larry Kudlow, but he was quite imposing. And I said, yeah.
He's talking about Xi, the Chinese prime minister, ruler, king.
No, I think he's getting very angry. And then I realized, how do we save this? This is going to be a disastrous afternoon. And I said, but I don't blame China. I blame our leaders. And then I realized that's true. I blame our leaders for allowing it to happen. I've told that to you and many people many times. But the theft of American jobs and American wealth is over. They understand that. My administration has taken the toughest ever action to confront China's trade abuses. We're taking in billions and billions of dollars in tariffs that China is paying for. We're not paying. China is paying because they're devaluing their currency to such an extent and they're pouring tremendous amounts of cash into their system. They're having the worst year in more than 57 years, more than half a century. Their supply chains are cracking very badly, and they are dying to make a deal. We're the ones that are deciding whether or not we want to make a deal.
What did I tell you guys? He just came out and confirmed what I said for the past few weeks. It's up to him. Maybe they don't want to make a deal. Trump doesn't want to make a deal. Unless it's a really, I don't know. Maybe they will. They'll do something, possibly for the farmers. So China buys agricultural goods, which would be a good deal. But, good prices. And, but the manufacturing, that has to come back. It's funny because the U.S. did build China. And the corporations, a lot of people went there from the U.S. They built that country up to be first world and the empire it is today. But now it's doing its own thing. It's got its legs up and it's running. And I've shown you guys the One Belt, One Road. And they're, putting out imperial-like World Bank type loans to Africa and all sorts of places. Even the U.S. they tried, and in South America, where they gain power over the ports, gain power over the trade, and then infiltrate and indebt a nation, raise the interest rate, and take its resources. You should read that book, Economic Hitman, or listen to it on Audible when you drive around. It's really great. If you read that or listen to it, your global world's perspective of how things work will It really connects the dots really well. That's why I always suggest on taking a look at that. So the VIX is all-time low. We're hitting new all-time highs. Listen, guys, I don't care if the stock markets go all-time highs. Metals could go all-time highs as well. And they've been doing that, right? Gold, silver has been going up and up for the past few months while the stock market was going up and up. It doesn't matter. It's all about the dollar and the yield on the 10-year. If the dollar is falling, metals go up. If the yield is dropping, metals go up. And just as of today, because of that Trump speech, finally the yields started dropping because the market just realized that it's QE. It's going to be QE forever. It's going to be negative interest rates forever, money printing forever. It's the only thing they could do, and they're going to do it. They have no choice. It's either that or we get the 1930s style depression or something. I don't know. So as today, the dollar took a huge dump. Well, not a huge dump, but it just started falling. I want to see the dollar fall below the 96 handle, and then it's gonna be great. This is a weekly chart, though. Let me take it to a daily. Yeah, the dollar needs to fall below the 97 handle. If it could do that, then metals are going to go and rally for quite some time, for a few more months. For now, I would be happy even if the dollar fell to the 97 and retested it, or the 200 MA at 97.50. Let's get back to the charts. 10-year yield. That's what you want to watch. Now, sometimes the divergence doesn't work. But for right now, it's working pretty great. The 10-year could keep falling, and if Trump wants negative yields and the Fed gives it to him, metals are going back up. And that's just that. I don't see much more downside to metals. Smart money's been buying, central banks been buying, everyone's buying around the world. It's just because the U.S. seems great and dandy, and it's in this euphoric melt-up phase, which it is, the final 4 phase of the bubble chart. I want to use that hyperwave theory. I'll talk about that in a separate video, but this is a great dip buying opportunity. All right. Even if metals crash for a few months, when everything crashes, it's still, you don't know how high the metals are going to go the next few weeks or months. It could go to 2,500, and then it might fall to 1,600. You still did better off if you bought now rather than later. Now, if you buy now and it keeps falling, it's not going to fall much more. I mean, there's support at 1420. I don't think it's going to break below that. On gold, at least. And 16... Let's go to the gold and silver chart. Yeah, it spiked up today. We hit 1461 on gold. Silver, I don't think it's falling below 16 bucks. So the downside risk, it's not there. The upside potential is there. Now, I did not anticipate. I was wrong. I did not think the bankers would smash it again. Of course they did. Look at this. This is a straight up. Look at this. Why did it fall? Why did it get smashed down like this? It's because every market's slightly manipulated. They might be smashing it so they could grab and accumulate themselves. Right now, a lot of the miners have pulled back by a decent amount. Great buying opportunity. Again, 15% off. It's the holiday season. I know people need money. So 15% off. And then join the private group. It's $10 a month. There's like a bunch of more research that I've done, and I found a few more royalties that are small sized, and there's a lot of upside to them because they're not junior, but they're not micro. They're somewhere in between. A couple $100 million market cap. Those have a lot of upside to them, and especially if they're royalty companies as well. So there's a lot of opportunities right now The problem for me personally is I'm running out of cash because I'm long metals still. And yeah, I'm taking a drawdown, but you could always hedge with an inverse ETF. So right now, I'm just being patient. I'm still accumulating. I'm dollar cost averaging right now uh, in the mining stocks and physical. You want to get physical as well. And that's what I'm doing. And I'm patient. And I think 2020 is going to be awesome. And I think right now we could rebound starting next week. We'll see. I'll keep you guys updated. Smash some likes, leave anything in the comments section. Please share my videos. It's the only way my channels grow. They haven't been growing now for weeks and months. And now they're becoming even more strict. I don't even know if I'm going to be on here much longer. That might be a stock short, right? All right. Until next time.